May I ask Rotarian Dennis to introduce you?
Yes, Mr. President. Ray doesn't need too much introduction to anybody here because the old beggar here was with us.
We managed to get rid of
We tried to get, you did, yeah, well we've been trying and we've succeeded now. So he doesn't need a lot except for our new members. Ray was a member of the elite pile of coppers. They nicked him at a slight strip wherever you park, they have you.
You wanted to think about it, you're off.
You've got your finger around the edge here. Yes, right, that. And he was in the police for many, many years, and Dagenham, I believe it was.
That's how I started.
Yeah, I've seen you 2 times. So, you know, he's been with us, and except for the new members, as I say, that's where he started. Bloody glad he's finished here now. But we welcome him here. And Gordon, who I knew Gordon, I don't know how many years ago now. I think I was a boy in short pants at that time. He's 50 years of Dagenham. They're both going to give us a talk on Passchendaele or
Passchendaele.
Oh,
Passion first, then Dale.
so I'll give you the comedy duo. Hey, and Gordon.
Thanks, very much.
Thanks.
Well, good afternoon, it's good to be amongst old friends again and see new ones. Ypres. Now we all know what Ypres is. In Belgium, about 40 miles from the coast, and was a scene of horrendous fighting from 1914 right through until 1918. There's never a day went by without there was something going on. But first of all, a description of a salient. A salient, says a dictionary, is a piece of land pushed forward into hostile territory, so that the enemy is ranged around it on 3 sides. Few of the soldiers around Ypres at that time carried dictionaries, but they more than merely knew that it was a place where you got shot at, from the front, from either side, and from the back. They also universally knew that it was never a good place to be. Originally, the Ypres salient was 16 miles long, and at its widest, some 5 miles deep, preluding into the German line. Now, this piece of work, mention this piece of work. This is Ypres, obviously, and Passchendaele is up there. As the crow flies, 6 miles. Third Passchendaele, which is the main talk, covers the area from Meningate, from there to about there. So all this area, this triangle, is what the talk is about. Men. There was ask any person who has the slightest knowledge of World War I to describe in one word the horror and futility of war, and they will say Passchendaele. That village and its ridge was the main objective of the Third Battle of Ypres, and which is the main topic of this talk. There obviously was a first and a second battle, which should be mentioned briefly in order to make sense of the third and its aftermath. But before that, to put a final piece of the jigsaw, a brief mention of the opening skirmishes in 1914, which included the action at Mons, giving rise to that well-known saying, the biggest COCK since Mons, a well-known military term. The weakened remnants of the British forces, the old contemptibles, found themselves in trenches from the Belgian coast, which is somewhere here, east of Ypres and down towards Amantiers, which was down here, creating the salient. In the following 22 days of bitter fighting, what was left of the army found themselves within shouting distance of the Meningate, the line being about 3 miles at its widest. And yes, there was an original gate, but it's nothing like the one we know today. In October 1914, the Germans were on the brink of breaking through, but on the 31st of October, in one of the most remarkable actions of the First World War, The 2nd Worcesters counterattacked the enemy at Bennett Point at the small village of Gellerveld, which is that little blue spot on that somewhere. They closed the gap with the British line and saved the day. That one single action, the action by the one single battalion is still regarded as one of the most famous actions of the Great War. The Germans made one last attempt on the 11th of November 1914, when they again, believing that the British line was there for the taking, attacked a place called Nonbosch, or Nunswood. The German army had been reinforced with crack troops, whilst as far as the British was concerned, its platoons were made of cooks, dishwashers, orderly room clerks, waiters from the officers' mess, and other non-combatants who never seemed expected to see the business end of a rifle. That was a moot point anyway, because there weren't enough rifles to go round. And so they attacked with picks, shovels and entrenching tools, ready to pick the rifles dropped by the dead and wounded and to use them at point-blank range to drive off the enemy. A German officer captain in the battle asked where British reinforcements were, and was told quite calmly there weren't any. The line held just, and shortly after that day, the first battle of Ypres ended. The salient perimeter shrunk to 11 miles in length, but the line held. It consisted of little more than that of Ypres and its outskirts. That line is significant with regard to the final outcome of what lay ahead. Whilst the armchair analyst can divide first Ypres into neat and separate battles, it was never all quiet on the Western Front. Every day from then onwards, the opposing armies would do battle with each other, periodically engaged in ferocious fighting and killings that were given distinctive battle names. The Second Battle of Ypres lasted from the 22nd of April to 25th of May, when the Germans attacked at the north-eastern edge of the Salient, which is just there where that looks from. The main feature of this battle was the use of gas by the Germans on the opening day. This is generally accepted as the first major use of gas in warfare. The troops at that point in the front line were from North Africa, and not knowing what they were facing, panicked and fled, leaving a gap in the line in the British line for some 3 miles, and it was left to the Canadians to recover and repair the line. The British line was reduced even further, being just over 2 miles at its widest, but there was no breakthrough, even though the road to Ypres was open. The Germans did not realise the true effectiveness of the gas attack, and instead of advancing, they dug in. The Germans did have effective gas masks, but they did not push on their advantage. The Canadians used a body fluid, soaking handkerchiefs, to protect themselves. I'll leave you to work out what the fluid was. The Third Battle of Ypres, of which Passchendaele is a part, officially started on the 7th of June, when 21 mines that had been planted under the German lines on Messines Ridge were to be blown at 3:10 AM. They had their desired effect, the attack was deemed a success, and the subsequent infantry attack achieved all of their objects in the first phase of the battle. And then they stopped. There is a true story that only 19 of the 21 mines actually went off, 2 of them failing the last-minute engineer's test. You may well ask what happened to the other 2. Well, the exact location of these entrances was lost. And it wasn't until 1955 that one went off in a violent thunderstorm, killing some cows. The whereabouts of the one remains a mystery to this day. So, anybody contemplating going to Messines and its ridge, make sure the weather is fine and settled. Because if you don't, look out for flying cows. The largest crater, probably best known, is Spanbroek Molen, or Pool of Peace, where you can go, sit and contemplate the day's events. It is visited by many people, including school groups, who take advantage of the large free car park. Perhaps the most poignant event was that when one of these mines exploded 15 seconds later. Now the troops had been told, wait till the mines go off, 15 seconds, then it's clear to advance. One was 15 seconds late. So the Southern Irish Battalion set off, and most of them never made the front line. They were killed by falling debris. And they're buried where they fell. Southern Irish Battalion, people think Southern Ireland, 1916, IRA and all that lot. The Irish Army was part of the British Army till 1925. Or 22, anyway, in the 20s. So they didn't become a separate army until that time. The Battle of Besieged Ridge officially ended on the 14th of June. But it was a further 6 weeks before the main assault on Passchendaele began. There are two reasons given as to why such a lengthy delay occurred. One was that fresh troops had to be brought in, ammunition had to be supplied, and the heavy guns had to be brought forward for a successful bombardment to be effected. The other reason put forward in more than one publication was that the high-ranking officers wished to take a holiday. During that time, the Germans recovered and began building their defences. Pillboxes were constructed and their trench lines redesigned. It was called Defence in Depth. On the 31st of July, following an enormous preliminary bombardment lasting days, fought by more than 3,000 guns, 12 British divisions went into action. Unfortunately, to coincide with the start of the bombardment, it started to rain, and it didn't significantly stop for endless days and nights. There were periods when it didn't rain in September, but most of the time it threw it down, 24/7. At some point in ancient history, this part of Flanders lay under the sea. Flanders is a centuries-old word meaning flooded land. It was reclaimed bogland, which was only possible to inhabit and cultivate by building a complicated network of drainage ditches known in the local language as beaks. The bombardment totally destroyed these beaks, and the whole area became a morass of water-filled shell holes and a sea of thick, glutinous mud. The water became and remained stagnant. Duck boards were laid, but this didn't stop men with their equipment and horses falling off and disappearing to a certain death in the bottomless pools of mud. The Germans also knew the exact position of these duck boards and had endless target practice destroying them. It was into this unimaginable world that men were supposed to advance and fight. Tanks could not operate, and the heavy pieces of artillery had to be manhandled into position. Despite calls to Haig to abandon the attack, he persisted until the 6th of November. And 13 weeks after the start of the battle, Passchendaele Ridge and the village were taken, and 3rd Ypres came to an end. The point of this battle was to break open and head for the coast to take over the German U-boat pens. It would also be considered to turn right because there was a very large communications and transport centre at Roulers. But that is only part of why I'm here today, speaking on this subject. And I now wish to elaborate on a situation that means something to my main guest, who some of you may recognise as the Secretary of the Rotary Club of Dagenham, Gordon Jackson, with his wife Glenys. In fact, I would now like Gordon to continue the next part of this story.
Yes, well, my father joined the army in June 1916, and he was drafted into the 3rd 5th Battalion of the Lancashire Fusiliers, which was part of the 66th Division, and was stationed at Colchester for the training. And after the division had been inspected by the King George V, they were sent to France in March of 1917. After a spell of the Somme sector, which was a quiet section, after the spell on the Somme sector for a couple of months, he was transferred to the coastal section. Now, the coastal sector was very quiet because the lock gates on the User Canal had been opened, and the whole area was of trenches had been flooded. This move was part of the plan of the 3rd Battle of Ypres. It was supposed to advance when the attack through Passchendaele reached Antwerp, which was a very large submarine U-boat base, which was required to be dealt with. However, the main attack towards Passchendaele had little success, and heavy casualties. So in late September, the division was transferred to the East section, and on the 9th of October, the division was instructed to take up positions on the front line. The battlefield on the east of E consisted of a flooded area, this area here, which before the war had been drained by small brooks. But after the excessive shelling, it had been turned into quagmire. And ever since the battle has been known for the terrible conditions in which many men and horses were drowned in the mud. This stretched for some 3 miles before a number of ridges were reached with streams between them. And this is where the front line had reached by the 9th of October. The 66th Division was to advance by night along duckboards across the low-lying quagmire, and were scheduled to take up positions in the front line trenches by 5 AM on the 9th. And the 3rd 5th Battalion were to lead the attack between Augustus Wood and Hillside Farm. Most of this area was on a ridge which led the way to Passchendaele, which was some 2 miles further on. Because of the atrocious conditions, many of the troops had not reached their front line positions by 5 o'clock. However, the attack did take place with the troops which were available. And on the firm ground, the going was good. Eventually, some of the soldiers even entered Passchendaele. This was confirmed when eventually the Canadians captured it almost a month later, because they found the bodies of some of the 3rd 5th Battalion Lancashire Fusiliers in the ruined church. Incidentally, there is now a window in the church dedicated to the 66th Division. And when we visited it, there were a number of small wooden crosses which had been left by scholars of the Bury Grammar School. Bury is the regimental town of Lancashire Fusiliers, and part of the barracks houses the regimental museum. Many of the officers of the regiment were from that school. Meanwhile, the troops on the ridge were exposed to heavy artillery, mortar and machine gun fire from the neighbouring ridges, and eventually had to retire almost back to the original jumping off trenches. The remnants of the division then received orders to assemble in the grounds of the asylum. I don't think that's funny, but it's true. There is an asylum there, and that's where they went. The asylum was on the west side of Eton. This was used as an assembly point for troops from the front line and provided hot food, washing facilities and any other needs. When the roll call was taken, it was found that many men were missing, including my father. And as a result, his mother received a telegram telling her that he was missing. In the meantime, the 3rd Australian Division had taken over the sector. And at about this time, 100 years ago, the 12th of October, they advanced along the ridge, and as they did so, came across the casualties of the previous battle, amongst which were a number of wounded men, and in one shell hole were a number of dead soldiers and one was still alive. And that was my father. He was then sent back via an Australian first aid post and a casualty clearing unit, and finally to a hospital in France. Eventually, he was transferred to a convalescent hospital in England and was given leave to go home on Christmas in 1917. And as a result of him catching flu, his leave was extended. He was eventually posted after the German Spring Offensive in 1918. He was drafted to the 17th Battalion of the Lancashire Fusiliers and was involved in the counterattack which ended in the armistice for the 11th of November. He was discharged on the 7th of January 1990 and given a disabled pension because he was very deaf and had breathing difficulties. And as he'd been gassed on a number of occasions, and when he eventually died, his death certificate stated that his death was due to respiratory failure due to emphysema. Thank you.
The date Joseph was found was about the 12th of October, exactly 100 years ago today, which is why this talk is being given today, and why Gordon is here with his good leg. They knew they got to Passchendaele Church because it was a different colour to the rest of the Passchendaele village. It couldn't be recognised as a church, it was just a pile of brownish rubble. Well, the rest of the village was grey stone. So that's how they knew they were in the church. That's the destruction that there was in that area. It was officially a fourth edict from the 7th and 29th of April 1918. This battle is of no significance to this talk, other than one massive decision made by the commanding officer of the First Army, responsible for the Ypres salient, a certain General Plumer. Hopefully I'll be asked to do a further talk on Ypres regarding the aftermath of the war and the erection of the Menin Gate, where General Plumer will feature prominently. When you talk about statistics on any matter, one has to bear in mind that well-known saying, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And military statistics in the Great War equally apply. Each side enhanced the enemy's casualties and reduced their own. But to direct this talk to a conclusion, I shall give you figures from an amalgam of several sources. These are solely British casualties of dead, wounded and missing. First Ypres, October to November 1914, 58,000. Second Ypres, April-May 1915, 60,000. Third Ypres, July to November 1917, 300,000. In those three battles, a total of 84 VCs were won. There are 102 war cemeteries in the Ypres salient, some say 85, depending on where they lie in the salient. A sobering thought, whichever figure you adhere to. Each grave contains a body. Many of them do not bear a name, but are inscribed, known unto God. Many people believe that the Menin Gate contains all the names of the missing from the outbreak of hostilities in the salient to the end of the fighting. This is not true. The date only goes up to the 15th of August 1917. Why? They simply ran out of room. There was only room for 54,900. The remaining 34,888 were inscribed on a memorial wall at the rear of Tynecott Cemetery. That makes a total of 89,788 missing. But they're not missing, they're still there. The salient, particularly in front of and below Passchendaele, is considered by many a mass grave. There are 4 German cemeteries in the salient as well. Just 4. In the spring of 1918, the Germans began their last desperate offensive, and it was obvious that it was no longer possible to hold the ridge, and there was a strategic withdrawal. Not a retreat, it's named strategic withdrawal. On the orders of General Plumer, Passchendaele was given up. The troops fell back, and the salient was reduced to a tight little area. It was smaller than ever before, and was precisely the size to which it had been proposed to reduce it to, being the size it was in 1915. The general who suggested that in 1915 was probably sacked for his pains. His name was Dorian Smith, and it was his decision earlier in the war at Le Cateau, which is south of Mons, that actually indirectly changed the course of the entire war. The Schlieffen plan, which was the German plan, was to advance through Belgium, round the back of Paris and back to the borders. I mean, if they'd done that, Paris would have fallen, the war would have ended, that was it. But General Molt, who had done the Schlieffen plan, his brother was also a general, and he didn't have the strength of character of his brother, and decided to cut to the east of Paris, heading for the River Marne. At that point, the German right flank was exposed, and the Battle of Marne occurred, and the Germans were defeated. And that's what started the rush to the coast for trenches. That's how the trench line started from Belgium down to the border of Switzerland, which is some 800 miles. And it was at that point, after the Battle of Marne, that the Germans realised, or some did, that they couldn't win the war, because their plan was out the window. The plan was in ruins, in tatters, and all they could do was try and outflank the British Army by heading for the coast, and we did likewise, and ended up with the trench line. That was Dorian Smith. But no one remembered that in 1918. That was a lifetime of some 200,000 lives ago. In the 3 months the attack of Passchendaele took place, with the loss of life already mentioned, it took only 3 days to withdraw back to the starting point. After the war, it was the Battle Nomenclature Committee who saw fit to call those periods of intense fighting as first, second and third battles of Ypres. Was Third Ypres worth it? Military experts have argued this point for many, many years, and I don't think a definitive answer will ever be reached. Maybe one of you present can come with something approaching an answer. Many books have been written giving different perspectives. I found reading 3 of those books the insight. I needed to draw my own conclusion. From a military point of view, we got nowhere, and the casualty figures for doing that speak for themselves. But from a wider picture, if any of Ypres 1, 2 or 3 had failed, the Germans would have advanced to the coast, achieving all of their objectives, and a far different outcome of the war may well have resulted. On a lighter note, thank goodness, I'd now like to turn to the experiences of Gordon and I, with our 2 wives, Glenys and Sylvia, walking and driving the salient. We must have been visiting that area at various times of the year for the best part of 15 months. At one time, Gordon and I were sitting on a wall, as old men do, in the market square of Ypres, when we were approached by 2 teenage girls with clipboards. We were asked our nationalities and our purpose for being in Ypres. We told them our reason, and I added the comment, "You are not going to believe this." They studiously made notes on what we were said, then they both suddenly stopped writing, got up, walking away, scratching their heads with their pencils. We never worked out why they walked away. Perhaps it was our aftershave. We identified the old asylum where Joseph had been taken to. It is now a hospital, with the reception area being a large goldfish type area in which sat 2 mature ladies. It was obvious when they were behind a screen, it was obvious in less than 10 seconds that they hadn't a clue what we were talking about. They looked at each other, then back at us. They looked at each other again. They both gave us one of incredulity. One of them made a phone call. We thought, here we go, we're going to get escorted off, taken by the police, or who knows what. But we were introduced to a man who happened to be the archivist of the building. And he thought it was his birthday when Gordon started telling him Joseph's story, and yes, he could speak good English. We more or less found close proximity of where Joseph was found by using trench maps and local knowledge we had picked up, and in doing so spoke to many people who live in the area and speak English. We went looking for the location of Augustus Wood, and we asked the local couple where it was. Unfortunately, the language barrier kicked in, and we went our separate ways. We came to the conclusion that the wood must have been destroyed in the war and did not now exist. When we were in the hillside farm area, we stopped at a house with a long drive and a German pillbox in its back garden, which is, who doesn't have a German pillbox in the back garden? We spoke to a man in the house, drive, and told him our story and went on our way. We were followed by a car flashing its lights, so we pulled over. A woman got out of the car, told us she was the wife of the man we had spoken to and to follow her. She took us to a house in Passchendaele and was introduced to a very old man who thought he knew Gordon's father. Yeah. How they worked that one out remains a mystery. The fact that he and his family could not speak a word of English between them, and we didn't know what language they were speaking anyway. But we got on well, and we had a fine time with a cup of tea. It was an hour turn to scratch our heads. On one of our visits to Farlet Farm, which is Port Capella, which is just up there, we came across the reality of the battle. The owners of the farm still work the fields, and the son of the family had to sit high on the front of the farm's tractor to look out for unexploded shells, which still litter the area just below ground. I casually inquired, was he any good at his job? And I was told he hadn't missed one yet because he was still on his perch. There are other stories which I could mention, but time is an issue. There was nothing we liked more than walking the area and tracing Joseph's footprints below Passchendaele, picking out the points of interest to us and enjoying the local food and drink, trying to imagine what it must have been like. That last part was impossible. Thank you, Mr. President. I hope it's made sense, because people were asking 30, what's all that about? Anyway, you don't now know there was the first and the second, but what happened in that area. Now, the Passchendaele, if you follow the Gravenstaffel Road, which is that one up there, it disappears up there, and also this area around here, to Passchendaele, that is roughly the area of where the attack of Passchendaele took place. On the Gravenstaffel Road there is a cheese factory. There's a silver service restaurant and a Elk South. If you stand in the car park, you can look at Passchendaele Church, which is like 3 miles up there. And we stood there thinking, how on earth did it take 3 months to get from literally where we were standing to the church, which you can see just up there. And then the enormity of the situation hit home. There are still events going on. I'm going to mention the Menin Gate. We all know about the 8 o'clock last post celebration that takes place. That hopefully will feature in our next talk on the Menin Gate, which I spoke to Colin about, and which we might be able to sort something out. And also as another appetizer, I mentioned to Colin, I was asked at one club, I've heard of the First World War, but how long did it last? And you think, yeah, all right. But then somebody said to me, how did it all start? What happened? So I've been researching Sarajevo, July 1914. That you think, I mean, we've all heard of Gavril Princip, but we've never heard of the others. To say it was like a script from a Marx Brothers film, it's not too far from the point. I won't spoil it, because if I get anybody back, I'll do the talk. It is amusing to say the least. And of course we do know what happened to Gavril Princip, don't we? guess. All we're going to reveal, hopefully, right next door. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you.
I've got the books here, if anybody wants to have a look through them. Passchendaele, day-by-day account, and another Passchendaele book here. If anybody wants to have a look, they are there. So there are hundreds of books on Passchendaele from different aspects, but very few of them are the photographic record like we've got in these books here. So, there we go.
Okay. Any burning questions? What are thanks proposed?
There's one over here.
Sorry.
Hello.
Hi.
Come here, John. What inspired your passion for Passchendaele?
I've always been interested in the First World War, going back yonks. And my first passion, if you like, was the Somme. Been to the Somme many, many times. And then I went to Vimy Ridge, Lens, and then Ypres was obviously always there.
Yeah.
So we thought we would go. And the landscape of Ypres has changed out of all proportion. It's now a very busy, bustling, light industry area. Obviously it's steeped in the First World War. There are many hotels in Ypres. I've stayed at quite a few. There are some nice drinking places. But the other thing about Ypres, at 10 o'clock at night it closes down.
Okay.
There's no McDonald's, there's no Burger King, there's no KFC.
Hooray.
I mean, yeah, there's no trouble.
Yeah.
People go to the Benning Gate, 8 o'clock. If there's nothing special going on, the ceremony lasts about 10-15 minutes when the buglers come out and do the bit. But you can, when you go there, you have to get there early if you want a good seat to see what's going on. There are seating areas stacked up like an arena. 8 o'clock, the police come, stop the traffic, out of the buglers, and you can hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
There is no applause. There is nothing. And inside the Benning Gate is a huge. Well, you've seen pictures of it. The resonance of the sound of the bugles brings it home. And you can understand General Plumer's expression. They're not missing. They're here. And that's why you go there. You don't walk around thinking whatever. Ypres is a lively marketplace. There's all sorts going on. They've got a very active Rotary Club, which I made contact with. They were collecting in the cloth hall one time, and we spoke at length about various things. There's plenty going on. Plenty going on. And I'm not part of the Ypres Tourist Board. It's worth a visit. It's worth a visit. If that sort of thing. David Fell's not here. His relative is on the wall at Tycott Cemetery, one of the missing. And we actually found it for him. I took a photograph and blah blah.
Wonderful.
There's a massive museum at Tycott Cemetery, which is it's just been enlarged. It's not the most comfortable places to be, but it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
Every few minutes, a name of one of the dead, you hear it comes out. Who he was, what his regiment, his death. As it was, Gordon's relative was taken to an Australian casualty clearing station, by a big station on Hill 40, Hill 40. Why the given number? That's metres above sea level. Hill 60, Hill 40, Hill whatever thing.
Wow.
That's the relevance of the why is it Hill 60, Hill 40, blah blah. And it's just one of those things that's developed. It's a nice place to go. An hour to Dover, hour and a half on the ferry, an hour and a half drive, you're in Ypres. It's as simple as that. Motorways, routes. Well, they drive on the wrong side of the road, but you can get over that. You know, worry too much about that.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Brian.
You're a generation removed from me, more or less, but
I think it's every family still talks about relatives who died in that conflict. It was a massive thing. You've mentioned numbers which are difficult to comprehend.
It is.
If you took the whole massive thing together, a complete and utter waste of everything. But it was a war which had to happen to demonstrate, I think, that you couldn't have wars like that before. It never happened again, of course, because of that.
That's what it says.
Hence the reason of the Second World War was entirely different.
Yeah.
And I think anybody who's been there, I've had little experience, but I've been to Really Ridge and seen the Canadian thing. And little things that you learn shape you really. But while we were there looking at Really Ridge, we learned that that area is Canadian.
Yes.
They gave it to the Canadians. It's Canadian property. It is part of Canada and staffed by Canadian young people throughout the summer who do it. That sort of thing impresses you when you go there because you walk along the track and the guy says, "Don't go either side because now and then the sheep step on something and blow up." So that gives you some idea. It's donkey's years after all. I can't have a concept of what it's like. Thank you very much for a little bit of insight into a personal thing from Gordon on his partner's position there, and brings it home to us. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Yeah.
Very much.
So thank you, Ray, and thank you, Gordon, for giving this wonderful description, which I can be confident in. Anyway, reminder, apologies, book, menu, and website. Final toast, please.